And we're back with AP as we see it, and we were discussing college basketball. I want to come back to that Alabama basketball team. As I said, defensively, they really struggle. They gave up 110 points, was a record on the road to Missouri. 110 points, you're the number one or two team in the country. That's not going to get you a national championship. You're going to have to play a game in the tournament probably where your defense is going to win it for you because your shooting is off. And I say that because that's been the trend through the years. You're going to have a game where it's close and it's tight, and your defense is going to have some stops. So Alabama defensively is going to have to do much better. We know they can score, obviously averaging 90-plus points a game, setting school records, scoring over 100 points sometimes. So, but Nate Oates and company, somehow they're going to have to come up with a combination of players on the court, 5 at a time. They can play some defense or find a group that specializes in defense near the end of the game, let's say. Come up with some plan. The question I've always wanted to ask Nate Oates is when his team shoots below 25%, let's say in the first half from the three-point line, what is the statistic in the second half? How many times have they come into the normal range where he wants his team to shoot probably around 35%? That's probably I think that's the acceptable percentage from the three-point line. He must have that number from all the games he coached. He's a mathematician. I'd love to ask him that question. Coach, how many times has your team shot 25% or below from the three-point line, and then they finish the second half, they shoot 35, let's say 35% and above? Because if you know that number, which he does, I think at some point in the second half for maybe a 3-4 minute stretch, you have to come up with another plan to force the ball down low or have your team drive to the basket every time and shy away from the three-point shot. I know that goes against their plan, but you have to have an alternative scheme to win ball games when your team cannot perform and hit those three-point shots. So I would love to ask him that question at some point. I know he's got that answer, but I wonder if he really embraces the fact that he has to come up with an alternate plan to get closer to the basket when his team is faltering from the three-point line. Most coaches who implement that type of scheme to shoot from the three-point line, they're going to keep telling their players, keep shooting from the arc. It's going to go in eventually. But I just, I've seen it a few times in games with Alabama. The entire game, they can't make shots from the three-point line, and consequently they struggle. And then now you're having problems defensively. The other team is scoring. I think that you've got to come up with a secondary way to win ball games. But anyway, that's just something I'd like to ask him at some point if I get a chance. Like I said, gave up 110 points to Missouri this week. That's not going to win you any championship, giving up that many points. Anyhow, so we're gonna look at the college basketball. They had this past Saturday the preliminary rankings by the selection committee, NCAA selection committee. You had 5 teams out of the top 6 were SEC teams. You had Alabama. Auburn was on the number 1 line. Alabama was on the number 1 line, 2 overall. Florida was on the number 1 line. You also had Tennessee was number 2. They were 6th overall. Florida, I don't have that ranking overall. Texas A&M was on the number 2 line as well. Kentucky on the number 3 line. So the SEC right now, they have those teams from 3 at the top, 2 on the number 2 line, Tennessee, and also Texas A&M on the 2 line as well. So that's quite a record for the SEC. Like I say, it's spectacular, it's historic, it's unprecedented. If they can continue to win ball games. Now they're facing each other. These last 5 or 6 games are going to beat up each other, but I still think they're going to be recognized as the top teams in America and have quite a few of the top 16 teams, which means they'll be ranked seeded 1 through 4 in the different regions. So I still think they're in good stead. Bubba Cunningham, the athletic director of North Carolina, he gave those preliminary rankings on Saturday. And so I think the SEC, I'm really looking forward to the NCAA basketball tournament this year with the SEC and hoping that good things happen. And they get to San Antonio, they reach some Final Fours and Final 8, and Sweet 16s. I'm hoping that all their losses, if they do occur, will be above the Sweet 16, and at least one team will get to the Final Four, as I mentioned. We're also going to take a look at the women, and that's Dorita Dawkins. She's the of Arkansas, the Assistant Vice Chancellor and Deputy Director of Athletics. She's the chairperson. The 68-team field, and that's a 68-team field with the men as well. But something new in the women's the last couple years is they only have 2 sites. One of the sites will be Birmingham, Alabama. The other one will be Spokane, Washington. The preliminary rankings by the NCAA Selection Committee had South Carolina on the 1 line, 2 overall, Oklahoma number 4, 15th overall. You had Texas number 3 overall. They were a number 1. That's in the Birmingham region. And then you had the Spokane region. You had LSU on the 2 line, 6th overall. You had Tennessee at number 4. They're 16th overall. And then you had on the 4 line Kentucky, they're 13th overall. So the SEC women's teams are doing quite well. As normal, they've been a strong conference, 40 years at least, I guess. So the SEC men's and women's basketball, these are they have a chance to win a national champion. They have a chance to get many, many teams in the college football, the college basketball playoff, and the March Madness are going to be a big part of it, the SEC men's and women's. I think that basketball, when you look at them and you're trying to project and predict, as I said, I think in a prior episode, that you want a strong play from your point guard. You want the free throws, especially in the last 5 minutes, to have a high percentage. You want to cut your turnovers down. You want to be strong rebounding the basketball. You want to have your shooters be the people who are taking the shots, the majority of the shots. Basketball is not a democratic sport. Everybody plays defense. Everybody you hopefully can get some rebounds, but not everybody should be shooting the ball. I want my shooters to have the ball, especially at the end of the game. And you're going to have people that are going to surprise you coming off the bench. You need that type of play. And if you're going to win 6 games, you're going to have somebody's going to have to come forth from your bench, or maybe a non-scorer, have a big ball game. And that's all it takes sometimes to win in the NCAA tournament. But the NCAA tournament, it's great. And we always preface our remarks. We try to basketball, ball in the basket. That's the most important part of the game of basketball. If you can shoot, you have a chance. It's just like in college football. You have a quarterback, you have a chance. You have a chance, especially at the end of the game. If it's close, your quarterback can drive the field and score a winning touchdown, field goal, lead their team. In basketball, you have some shooters. You can beat anybody, as we saw. As we've seen in this NCAA tournament through the years. You have a team, maybe you never heard of that team, you don't know any of their players, they're from what's perceived as a lesser conference, smaller conference, and they beat some of these Power 5 teams, and it's upset after upset. We know that happens. But if you have a number of shooters, I always, on a basketball team, if I was a coach, I always like to have a minimum of 4 shooters. That would be, let's say, 2 shooters per game are having a good night, and the other 2 shooters, maybe it's not their night. But you always have 4 shooters. You can rotate in and out and give yourself a chance to win basketball games. You like to have somebody protect the rim, a rim protector. You like to have your whole team play collective defense, and you want to shut down the other team's top scorers. That's easier said than done, but those are some of the things. The point guard play is important. The free throw shooting, especially at the end. And also, you're going to play a tight ball game. How you coach at the end of that tight ball game, that's going to make a difference for your team. So the coach is part of that equation of winning games. There's no question. College basketball is really a sport where the head coach has quite an influence on the outcome of the game. And also, if you get your shooters the ball in critical moments, and you should have success. But I'm looking forward to the SEC, the men's teams and the women's teams being in the tournament, being successful, because that's how they're going to be judged at the end of the year. 10 years from now, when you look back at a team, what did they do in the tournament? They're not going to mention the 30 wins. They're going to say, what happened to you in the NCAA tournament? And that's men's and women's. The SEC has excellent coaches on the men's side and the women's side. So they're going to have a great deal of representation by the number of teams that qualify and have earned a berth. And, you could have an SEC men's team win a title, SEC women's team win a title from basketball, sport that for many years, people thought that the SEC was just a football conference. I beg to differ. They've won championships in basketball, men's and women's, as we've seen, especially on the women's side. They've won quite a few. In the men's, they've won their share. But they need to get back to that Final Four and give themselves the chance of being San Antonio. So we look forward to covering that. It'll be on our social media platforms as well. But we want to thank everyone for another episode of AP As We See It. We had the full discussion about the college football playoff and that future, and then the SEC men's and women's basketball. And so we'll be back next week for another edition of AP As We See It. Thank you very much.